The train station was loud, filled with white smoke and crying families. Arthur held his wife, Sarah, tightly in his arms. He kissed her forehead gently. He promised to write a beautiful letter every single week. He promised to earn enough money to save their sick daughter, Lily. Lily was only 5 years old. She suffered from a terrible, rare blood disease. She was very weak and pale. Arthur had to leave them. He accepted a new, high-paying job in a far, foreign country. He carried a small, brown suitcase. He waved goodbye from the moving train. Sarah stood on the cold platform and cried. She trusted her loving husband with all her heart. For the first 3 months, everything was absolutely wonderful. Every Friday morning, the friendly postman brought a thick, brown envelope. Inside, there was always a long, beautiful, handwritten letter from Arthur. Arthur wrote carefully about his long days. He wrote about how much he missed his family's warm hugs. The letters always smelled like his familiar, comforting cologne. More importantly, there was a lot of cash folded inside the paper. The money paid for Lily's expensive hospital medicine perfectly. Because of Arthur's hard work, Lily was slowly getting better. Sarah felt incredibly lucky and grateful. She read the sweet letters to Lily every night before sleep. The father's words made them feel safe and loved. They believed their difficult life was finally changing for the better. Then, the warm letters suddenly stopped arriving. 1 whole week passed with absolutely nothing. Then 2 weeks went by. Sarah stood by the front window every single day, waiting anxiously for the postman. Her heart beat fast with deep fear. She worried about her husband constantly. Was Arthur sick in that foreign country? Was he in a terrible accident? Sarah prayed every night for his safety. She could not sleep at all. Meanwhile, the hospital bills started to grow again. She desperately needed his money, but she needed his loving words even more. The silence from Arthur was heavy and scary. It felt like a dark, stormy cloud over their small, quiet house. Finally, after 2 long, painful months, a new envelope arrived. Sarah opened it quickly with shaking hands. But she immediately felt that something was terribly wrong. The paper inside was perfectly clean and bright white. It did not smell like Arthur's cologne at all. She looked closely at the words. They were not written by his warm hand. They were typed on a cold, loud machine. The black ink looked strange and distant. The typed words were very short and simple. I am fine. Here is money. I am very busy. That was all. There were no sweet words or promises. The money inside was only half of the usual amount. Sarah felt a freezing cold shiver down her spine. The loving Arthur she knew seemed to be completely gone. He had vanished, replaced by this cold, typed piece of paper. She stared at the mechanical letters, feeling a deep, rising panic in her chest. What had happened to the man she loved so much? Sarah tried to stay calm for her sick daughter. She told herself that Arthur was just tired from working hard. But the typed letters continued to arrive every month. They were always short and completely emotionless. The money inside kept getting smaller and smaller. One evening, Lily was coughing badly in her small bed. Sarah felt completely desperate. She needed to hear her husband's voice. She found the emergency phone number Arthur had left before his trip. It was a number for his foreign office. She went to the public telephone. Her hands shook as she dialed the long international number. She listened to the phone ringing loudly in her ear. Finally, someone picked up. Sarah took a deep breath, ready to say her husband's name. But the voice on the phone stopped her completely. It was a woman's voice. The woman spoke in a strange, foreign accent. She sounded very close to the telephone. "Hello? Who is this?" the strange woman asked. Sarah felt a tight pain in her chest. "I am looking for Arthur." "I am his wife," Sarah said nervously. There was a sudden, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Sarah could hear the woman breathing quickly. Then, without saying a single word, the strange woman hung up the phone. The loud, empty dial tone echoed in Sarah's shocked ear. Sarah walked home in the dark rain. Her mind was spinning with terrible thoughts. Who is that woman? Why did she hang up the phone so fast? Sarah's trust began to break into tiny pieces. She looked at the old, happy photos of Arthur on the wall. 2 weeks later, the postman brought another typed letter. Sarah opened it with angry, shaking fingers. This letter was different. It was longer, but the words were incredibly cruel. Arthur wrote about his life in the foreign city. He said he was exploring new places. "I have met some wonderful new friends here," the typed letter read. "My life is very comfortable now. I am enjoying the freedom of this beautiful city." There was no mention of Lily's illness. There was no mention of his love for Sarah. The typed words cut into Sarah's heart like a sharp knife. He was living a comfortable, happy life with new friends, and a strange woman was answering his phone. He was spending his money on himself while his sick daughter suffered at home. Sarah crushed the typed paper in her hand. Hot tears of anger rolled down her cheeks. She realized the terrible truth. Her husband had changed. The big city and the money had completely corrupted his soul. He was slowly forgetting his poor family. She looked at Lily, sleeping weakly in the bed. Sarah wiped her tears away. She promised herself she would be strong. She would save her daughter alone. She did not need a traitor. The warm love in her heart began to turn into cold, bitter hatred. The hospital bills grew into a massive mountain of debt. The doctor called Sarah into a cold, quiet office. He looked very serious. "I am sorry, Sarah," the doctor said gently. "If you cannot pay the hospital fee this week, we must stop Lily's advanced medical treatment." Sarah's entire world crashed down around her. Stopping the treatment meant her little girl would die. She had no time for pride or anger anymore. She sat at her kitchen table and wrote a desperate, crying letter to Arthur. She begged him for help. She wrote about Lily's pale face and weak breathing. She begged him to remember his promise at the train station. She sent the letter and prayed for a miracle. She waited by the door every single day, hoping the father would finally wake up and save them. A week later, a thin envelope arrived. Sarah tore it open quickly. It was another typed letter. There was absolutely no money inside. She read the cold, black letters on the white page. The words were the most cruel and selfish things she had ever seen. "I cannot send more money," the typed letter stated coldly. "I need to invest my savings into my own new career here. I am building a new future for myself. Please stop bothering me with these sad letters. You must solve your own problems now." Sarah dropped the paper on the floor. Her heart turned completely to ice. He was abandoning them to die. He wanted to build a new future without them. She screamed loudly in the empty kitchen, breaking a glass cup against the wall in pure, wild anger. She decided to sell her own blood. She decided to sell their small house. She was ready to do anything to save Lily. But the very next morning, the postman knocked on her door again. He handed her a large, thick, heavy brown package. There was no name on the package. The sender was listed only as an international charity organization. Sarah opened the package carefully. Inside, she found stacks of crisp, clean cash. It was a massive amount of money. It was exactly enough to pay the entire hospital bill. There was a small, printed note attached to the money. For Lily's medical treatment. From an anonymous donor. Sarah fell to her knees and cried tears of pure joy. A stranger from a charity had saved her beautiful daughter's life when her own husband had completely abandoned them. Sarah paid the hospital that same day. Lily's treatment continued successfully. But Sarah made a firm, dark promise to herself. She took all of Arthur's old photos and letters. She threw them into the fire. She watched his smiling face burn away into gray ashes. She would work 3 jobs. She would raise Lily to be strong and independent. Arthur was officially dead to them. He was nothing but a greedy, selfish traitor. She closed the door on her past forever, ready to face the hard future completely alone. 10 long years passed like a slow, heavy river. Sarah worked day and night in a small bakery. Her hands became rough and tired, but her heart was incredibly proud. Because of her hard work and the anonymous charity money, Lily was completely cured. Lily grew into a beautiful, smart, and healthy teenager. She was graduating from high school at the top of her class. They lived a quiet, peaceful life together. Sarah never spoke Arthur's name. In their small house, the traitor husband was a completely forbidden subject. But Lily was curious. She secretly wanted to know what happened to the man who left them. One night, while Sarah was sleeping, Lily used the school computer. She searched for Arthur's full name and the foreign city where he used to work. Lily scrolled through many boring internet pages. Finally, she found a dark, forgotten website. It was a digital archive of old industrial accidents. Her heart stopped beating. She saw a scanned copy of an official death certificate. The name on the paper was Arthur's exact name. The document said Arthur died in a massive chemical mine collapse 9 years ago. Lily stared at the bright screen, completely shocked. She printed the paper with shaking hands. She ran into her mother's bedroom, crying loudly. She woke Sarah up and showed her the terrible paper. Sarah looked at the death certificate. She did not cry. Her face remained hard and cold. "This is probably a mistake, Lily," Sarah said strictly. "Or maybe it is just another one of his selfish lies to escape us. We do not need him. He is a traitor." Suddenly, there was a loud knock on their front door. It was very late at night. Sarah and Lily walked to the door carefully. Sarah opened it slowly. A delivery man was standing in the dark. He held a heavy, wooden box covered in foreign stamps. "Delivery for Sarah," the man said. Sarah signed the paper and took the heavy wooden box inside. She looked at the sender's address. It was from the exact foreign country where Arthur went. But the sender's name was not Arthur. The name on the box was simply David. Sarah placed the wooden box on the kitchen table. She felt a strange, cold energy coming from it. She was angry that the past had found her again. She wanted to throw the box directly into the garbage. She did not want any more lies. "Do not open it, Lily," Sarah commanded sharply. It is probably just cheap garbage from his new family. Let the past stay dead. She turned off the kitchen light and walked back to her bedroom. She locked her door, trying to ignore the painful memories. But Lily stayed in the dark kitchen. She stared at the mysterious wooden box. The printed death certificate was still in her hand. Her curiosity was much stronger than her mother's bitter anger. She grabbed a small metal tool and slowly opened the heavy wooden lid. The heavy wooden lid creaked loudly as Lily opened it in the dark kitchen. She turned on a small flashlight. She expected to see money, legal papers, or maybe photos of a new, happy family. But the inside of the box was completely different and terrifying. Right in the center of the box was a pair of heavy, industrial safety goggles. The thick glass lenses were completely shattered and broken into tiny pieces. The edges of the plastic goggles were melted and covered in dark, dry, brown stains. It was old blood. Lily gasped and stepped back. Under the broken goggles, there were several old, dusty plastic cassette tapes. There were no typed letters. There were no written notes. Lily's hands shook as she carefully picked up the first cassette tape. It had a small white sticker with a number. She quietly brought a small, old cassette player from her bedroom. She plugged it into the kitchen wall. She pushed the tape inside and pressed the play button. The machine made a soft, hissing sound. Lily held her breath, waiting to hear her father's familiar voice. But the voice on the tape was not Arthur's. It was the deep, serious voice of an older man. He sounded very professional. Patient record, day 1. The man's voice echoed in the quiet kitchen. This is Dr. Evans at the Central Emergency Hospital. Sarah heard the strange voice from her bedroom. She opened her door and walked into the kitchen. She looked at the broken, bloody goggles on the table. She looked at the spinning tape machine. Her anger slowly faded, replaced by a deep, terrifying confusion. The patient was brought in from the deep chemical mines. The doctor's voice continued smoothly. There was a massive, illegal explosion in Sector 4. The working conditions down there are highly toxic and incredibly dangerous. Nobody should be working in those deep, poisonous tunnels. Sarah frowned. Chemical mines? Arthur was supposed to be working in a clean, comfortable, and safe office building. That was his high-paying job. Why was a doctor talking about toxic mines? She sat down slowly next to her daughter, completely mesmerized by the spinning tape. The patient is in critical condition, the doctor's voice said sadly. He has lost a massive amount of blood. The toxic chemicals have completely burned his face. We had to perform emergency surgery immediately to save his life. The physical damage is absolutely catastrophic. The tape hissed quietly for a few seconds. Sarah stared at the bloody goggles. A terrible, cold fear began to grip her heart. The story she believed for 10 years was slowly cracking apart. The comfortable life with new friends was suddenly sounding like a complete lie. We have stabilized him, the doctor finally said. But the explosion was too close. The chemical burns are too deep. The tape clicked loudly and stopped. Lily looked at her mother. Sarah was pale as a ghost. Lily quickly put the second tape into the old machine. The second tape began to play. The quiet hissing sound filled the small kitchen. Suddenly, Sarah heard a voice that made her heart completely stop. It was Arthur. His voice was incredibly weak, shaking with terrible pain. He sounded like a broken, dying man. "Please, nurse," Arthur whispered on the tape. "Can you type a letter for me? I need to send money to my wife for my daughter." Another voice answered him. It was the exact same foreign woman's voice that Sarah had heard on the telephone 10 years ago. "Rest now, Arthur," the kind nurse said softly. "I will type the letter exactly as you say. But you need to save your strength." The truth hit Sarah like a violent lightning strike. The strange woman on the phone was not a secret lover. She was his hospital nurse. Arthur never worked in a safe, comfortable office. He had lied to them to protect them. He knew the only way to get enough money fast to save Lily was to do the most dangerous job in the world. He went deep into the toxic, illegal chemical mines. He had sold his safety and his health to save his little girl. The doctor's voice returned on the tape. "The patient woke up today," the doctor recorded. "He survived, but the tragic news is final. The chemical blast completely destroyed his optic nerves." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands. Tears instantly flooded her eyes. "He is completely and permanently blind," the doctor confirmed sadly. Furthermore, the heavy falling rocks crushed his right side. "We had to amputate his right arm below the elbow to stop the deadly infection." The loud tape player hummed in the silent kitchen. The cruel, typed letters suddenly made perfect, heartbreaking sense. Arthur did not type those cold words because he was busy or selfish. He typed them because he was completely blind and had no right hand to hold a pen. He had to dictate his private, painful letters to a busy hospital nurse. He kept the words short and emotionless because he was ashamed and in terrible pain. He hid his catastrophic injuries from his family. He suffered in the total darkness, completely alone in a foreign hospital. Sarah fell forward onto the kitchen table. She cried louder than she had ever cried in her entire life. Her tears fell onto the broken, bloody safety goggles. The man she hated for 10 long years was not a traitor. He was an absolute, selfless hero. He had literally sacrificed his own eyes and his own arm to buy the medicine that cured their daughter. Lily hugged her mother tightly, both of them sobbing uncontrollably in the dark kitchen. But the worst truth was still waiting on the final, tragic cassette tape. They had completely misunderstood his sacrifice. They had burned his photos and cursed his name while he lived in endless pain. Sarah's heart broke into a million unfixable pieces. She pressed the play button for the third tape, terrified of what she would hear next. The third tape hissed softly. Arthur's weak, shaking voice filled the room again. "Nurse, please write down that I have new friends. Tell her my life is very comfortable." He was crying as he spoke. "I must make her think I am happy without them." Sarah listened to the tape in absolute horror. Arthur was intentionally lying to make her angry. The nurse's voice sounded very sad. "Arthur, why are you doing this? You just received a massive compensation check from the mining company for your terrible accident. You can go home now." "No," Arthur cried out desperately. "I cannot go home. Send the entire compensation check to the international charity. Tell them to pay Lily's hospital bills secretly. Do not tell Sarah it is from me. She must believe it is an anonymous donation." Sarah gasped loudly. The massive charity donation that saved Lily's life was not a miracle from strangers. It was Arthur's blood money. It was the exact price of his beautiful eyes and his strong right arm. He gave every single penny to them, keeping absolutely nothing for himself. "If she knows the truth, she will come here," Arthur whispered on the tape, his voice breaking with deep sorrow. Sarah is a good, loyal woman. She will spend the rest of her beautiful life taking care of a useless, blind cripple. I will ruin her future. He coughed heavily. I want her to be free. Write the final letter, nurse. Tell her I want to cut all contact. Tell her I am selfish. She must hate me. It is the only way she will move on and raise Lily to be happy. Arthur had planned the ultimate, cruel sacrifice. He destroyed his own image in her heart to set her free. He chose to die as a hated villain so his wife could live a normal life. He accepted her hatred as the final, painful cost of his deep love. The typed letters were not a sign of his betrayal. They were a shield of pure, selfless love. He protected them from his own tragic disability. Sarah screamed in emotional agony. She had burned his photos. She had taught Lily to hate the father who saved her life. I am so sorry, Arthur, Sarah sobbed into her hands, rocking back and forth on the floor. I am so stupid. I am so sorry. Lily held her mother, crying silently. The heavy wooden box on the table felt like a sacred, tragic monument to a saint. Sarah suddenly stopped crying. She stood up quickly and wiped her wet face. She looked at the wooden box and the foreign address printed on the side. The package was sent only 1 week ago. That meant someone packed it recently. The story was not finished yet. He might still be alive, Lily, Sarah said, her voice shaking with desperate, wild hope. We are going to find him. We are going to bring him home. The long decade of bitter silence was finally over. The true search for the broken hero had begun. Sarah did not hesitate for a single second. The next morning, she put a for sale sign in front of her small bakery. She sold her business and her car at a very cheap price to get cash instantly. She bought 2 expensive airplane tickets for a flight that night. Sarah and Lily flew across the world to the foreign country. They carried the heavy wooden box and the mysterious address label. When they landed, they hired a local taxi driver. Sarah showed him the address of the sender named David. The taxi drove away from the bright, modern city center. They drove for 2 hours into the dark, dirty, industrial mountains. The air smelled strongly of harsh chemicals and burnt coal. They finally stopped in front of a terrible, gray building surrounded by high wire fences. It was not a nice neighborhood. It was a poor, forgotten camp for sick and disabled mine workers. Sarah and Lily walked into the dark, smelling hallway. They asked a tired nurse where they could find a man named David. The nurse pointed to a small, dirty room. Inside the room, an old man was sitting in a wheelchair. His legs were completely paralyzed. He looked at Sarah and Lily with tired eyes. I am David, he said softly. Sarah pulled out the wooden box and the fake death certificate that Lily found on the internet. You sent this box, Sarah said, her voice shaking with intense emotion. Where is Arthur? Is he really dead? David looked at the fake paper and sighed deeply. He shook his head slowly. That certificate belongs to another worker with the same name. Arthur is not dead. Sarah gasped and squeezed Lily's hand tightly. A massive wave of relief washed over her body. Her husband was still alive. But David did not smile. His face looked incredibly sad and serious. He pointed a shaking finger toward a dark door at the end of the long hallway. He is alive, but he is fading very fast, David explained quietly. The chemical poison from the explosion has been slowly destroying his lungs for 10 years. He refused to buy expensive medicine. He wanted to save all his money for a charity back in his home country. David looked down at his paralyzed legs. Arthur is a good man. When the doctors said he only had a few weeks left to live, I packed his old things and sent them to your address. I thought his family deserved to know the real truth before he died. Sarah thanked David with tears in her eyes. She turned and walked slowly toward the dark door at the end of the hallway. Every step felt incredibly heavy. 10 years of anger, pain, and misunderstanding were disappearing with every breath. She was finally going to see him. She stopped in front of the old wooden door. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She slowly turned the metal handle and pushed the door open. She stepped from the bright hallway into the cold, silent darkness of Arthur's lonely world. The room was small, cold, and very dark. The heavy curtains were closed tightly because the man inside did not need the sunlight. In the corner of the room, sitting quietly in an old wheelchair, was Arthur. Sarah covered her mouth to stop herself from crying out loud. He was incredibly thin and fragile. His hair was completely gray. He wore dark glasses over his ruined eyes. His right sleeve was empty and folded neatly at the elbow. He looked like a faded, broken shadow of the strong, handsome man who left her at the train station. Arthur heard the soft footsteps entering the room. He turned his head quickly, acting very nervous. He could not see, but his other senses were sharp. He took a deep breath of the air. Suddenly, his body froze completely. He smelled a very faint, familiar scent of lavender soap. It was Sarah's soap. Panic spread across Arthur's scarred face. He knew she had found him, but his stubborn, protective love tried to fight one last time. He tried to protect his cruel lie. "Who is there?" Arthur shouted, trying to sound angry and strange. "I am busy. Go away." "Arthur," Sarah whispered softly, her voice breaking with absolute sorrow. Arthur shook his head violently. "You have the wrong room." He lied desperately, trying to turn his wheelchair away. "My name is not Arthur. Leave me alone. I have a new family. Go away." He was trying to push them away again to hide his terrible, pathetic condition. He did not want her pity. He did not want her to see him as a broken monster. But Lily stepped forward. She did not yell or argue with his silly lies. Lily stood very close to the shaking man in the wheelchair. She gently cleared her throat. She began to sing a very old, beautiful song. It was the exact sweet lullaby that Arthur used to sing to her every single night when she was sick in the hospital. Lily's voice was clear and angelic. The soft melody floated through the dark, cold room. Arthur stopped fighting the wheelchair. He stopped yelling. The lie completely died in his throat. His entire body started to shake violently. He dropped his head and began to sob uncontrollably. The strong, brave hero finally broke down. He cried like a small, lost child in the dark. His only remaining hand reached out weakly into the empty air, searching for the beautiful voice. Sarah did not wait another second. She rushed forward and fell to her knees. She wrapped her arms tightly around his thin, scarred body. She buried her face in his neck, crying tears of endless love and regret. "I am here, my love," Sarah whispered perfectly into his ear. "I am so sorry. You are not alone anymore. We are finally together." Arthur hugged her back with his one strong arm. He buried his face in her hair, smelling the sweet lavender soap. The dark, lonely prison he had built for himself was finally destroyed by the light of their pure, forgiving love. He was finally home. Sarah did not care about the terrible scars or the blindness. She gently bathed his face and combed his gray hair. She dressed him in warm, clean clothes. The doctors warned her that Arthur was too weak to travel, but Sarah refused to let him die in that cold place. She paid for a private medical flight. She brought her hero back to their home country. She brought him back to the warm, safe house he had worked so hard to protect. She placed him gently in his favorite, soft armchair near the large living room window. For the next 2 months, the house was filled with pure peace. Sarah cooked his favorite meals and fed him carefully. Lily sat by his feet and read beautiful books to him every evening. Arthur could not see their faces, but he smiled constantly. He felt completely surrounded by absolute love. However, the deep chemical poison in his lungs was too strong. Arthur grew weaker every single day. Eventually, he lost his ability to speak. He could only squeeze Sarah's hand to communicate. He was slowly fading away, but he was not afraid of the dark anymore. One quiet Sunday afternoon, the warm sunlight shined brightly through the window. Arthur was resting in his chair. His breathing became very shallow and slow. Sarah held his left hand tightly, kissing his knuckles while silent tears fell down her face. She knew the final moment had arrived. Lily walked quietly into the living room. She was holding a piece of paper. She knelt down next to her father's chair. She gently took his rough, scarred hand. She placed the piece of paper directly into his open palm. She folded his fingers over it. "Dad," Lily whispered softly, her voice filled with immense pride. "I want you to feel this. It is a handwritten letter." Arthur moved his fingers weakly over the thick paper. He could not read it, but he felt the fresh ink. He turned his head toward his daughter's voice. "It is my acceptance letter, Dad," Lily cried happily. "I was just accepted into the best medical university in the country. I am going to be a doctor. I am going to save poor, sick people, just like you saved me." A profound, beautiful peace washed over Arthur's scarred face. He squeezed the paper tightly in his only hand. He knew that his terrible pain and his dark sacrifice were completely worth it. He had traded his eyes and his arm for a brilliant, shining future for his little girl. Arthur smiled a perfect, joyful smile. He took one last, deep breath of the warm air, smelling his wife's sweet lavender soap. His chest stopped moving, and his hand slowly relaxed. The silent, brave hero closed his eyes for the final time, stepping out of the darkness and into the eternal light.